Hey, Innie.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good, good. Are we live right now or are we just talking?
We're live.
Oh, all right, we're live. Great.
Where are you? Where are you speaking to us from?
I'm here in Neuchâtel, Switzerland.
Actually, we spoke. Do you remember we spoke about 2 months ago and I totally fell for it. I think it was one of my first ever Zoom conversations and you had a virtual background. And I was like, look at your pad. That's incredible. And you just started laughing at me because you had some, I don't know, James Bond.
Yeah, that was I think I was in the Batcave that day. Depends on the mood that I'm in, but with all the live sort of things going on right now, I've decided to just be at home. So that's where we are.
And this call has been scheduled for a while. And before we move on, we have to address the fact that there's been some awful, tragic events in the world in the last few weeks since George Floyd was killed. And I know that a couple of days ago we had a chat, and you were not sure whether you wanted to do this.
Yeah.
Let's just discuss that quickly now. How has that affected you? And what are your feelings about that? And if you could just also remind me why you decided to go ahead with this talk. What is the?
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is that a lot of these press sort of things, whether they're interviews or live interviews or whatnot, they tend to be somewhat self-promotional. We were planning to come on here with like slides of my work and introduce myself and talk about all the things that I've made. And with everything that's going on right now, I don't really feel in a self-promotional mood. Yeah. So at the end of the day, I'm open to having these conversations and continuing with my press commitments, with I guess sort of the understanding that I'm not necessarily here for self-promotion, and that I will probably be coming with some sort of agenda that's about something larger than myself. So having a voice is an important privilege, and the responsibility that comes with that is not something that I take lightly. So that's why I'm here, and yeah, I'm hoping that we can have a great and enlightening conversation that will benefit all of our listeners and viewers, and even people that aren't going to be paying attention to this, but might hopefully feel the reverberations of some of the things that we hopefully can get done.
And I know you've got some images to show us in just a bit. And you also invited a colleague, a friend of yours, Chrissa Amuah, to join us later on. Tell us a little bit about Chrissa. What does she do, and why did you think it was important that she came and shared this platform?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the goal is to not be self-promotional. I think that part of the reason that I'm even here talking to you is because the past few years I've put in enough work and said yes to enough of press interviews and things like that, so people recognize me in my work. But that's not the case for a lot of people that look like me and come from where I come from. The fact of the matter is that, I've worked pretty hard to try to fit into the design world, the design scene, or the system as it is. I've been at it since 2010. And when I met Chrissa at Salone Satellite in Milan in 2016, it was, a breath of fresh air. She was there with Auntie Rose, her mother, and walking onto the floor and not just seeing someone who looks like me, but recognizing immediately that she was West African. It became comfortable, and her and her mother were like family for me while I was there. So we started our relationship there as friends, and when she came to me with the concept for Africa by Design, I told her that I would do everything in my power to support and participate, and you know, I'm hoping to take on a larger role there. And she's done such a good job of representing the spectrum of voices that you can find on the continent. She's done a great job of engaging with the traditional design press and giving a lot of designers a voice that normally they wouldn't have had otherwise. And you know, I really believe that what she has done with Africa by Design is the beginning of something much larger, especially since we're beginning to have the conversations that we're beginning to have now. Um, you know, the work that she's put in the last couple of years, you know, has laid the groundwork for what we hope to do in the future as a community to kind of represent our voice.
So Chris is waiting in the wings of this Zoom call, and we'll bring her in a bit later on. But first of all, I know you don't want this to be a self-promotional talk, but tell us a little bit about yourself, your background. Where did you grow up, and how did you get into design?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long story, and I've told it a lot of times actually at this point. So I'm going to give the abridged version here, but I'm from Pasadena, California. It's a suburb of Los Angeles, and my family is from Nigeria, my parents. And, you know, I went to the Art Center College of Design after dropping out of USC and doing a stint making music. After that, I got into the furniture design worlds with Bernhardt Design, with a project that I did as a student that still sells actually today. And since then, I've been a professional designer working with contract furniture brands like Cumberland and Newcraft, and most recently working with Knoll. And I've done some luxury design. Recently, a watch for Hermes, and I designed collectible design for Friedman Benda Gallery. And that's mostly what I've been doing as a designer. As a creative and an artist, you know, things have gotten more personal and more me. And I think it's important to kind of point that out and focus on that fact. You know, I've always found a way to put myself into the work that I do for clients. But until I received the opportunity to expose at Salone Satellite with the patronage of Terry Crews, and then I had my work seen by Friedman Benda Gallery and various luxury brands. Up until that point, you know, I'd never really felt like I expressed myself fully without any kind of restraint, without any thought to what the end result would be or if anybody would buy it. And, you know, the result of that was the Secret Garden collection, which kind of started this second phase of my career where my expressiveness is being welcomed. And yeah, and I think that was the beginning of my development as an artist, which eventually led to my most recent project, which was the Speechless exhibition at the Dallas Museum of Art, where I did a project called The Oracle.
And you said that when you met Chrissa at Salone Satellite, it was a breath of fresh air to meet someone that looked like you, a Black designer, a Black creative. What are your thoughts on the representation of Black people in design? Is it a structural problem that they're underrepresented? Is the media to blame? And putting a positive light on it, how can we work together to improve things?
I think that everything that you named is part of the problem. I think that it's a problem that started a long time ago, and I mean, I talked about it at length in the last live that I did, which if that ends up being online, people could watch that to hear more in depth, because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time rehashing that. But I will say that you know, if you really study the if you study the residual effects of colonialism and you study it through the perspective of how art that was non-Western made its way to people's shelves and to the museums in all these places, and what that process was, I think that it will be clear to anyone how we ended up in the situation that we're in right now. And to not dwell on that too much, I just want to say that from now on, I think, you know, it's less about having these conversations and about doing something. That's part of the reason that I'm sharing the platform with other designers that haven't gotten as much visibility as myself, because, you know, we could have interviews for the rest of this year talking about all of the issues, but I'd rather spend our time wisely by giving people information and resources so that they can find out for themselves what they've been missing, and also, you know, present solutions myself that create more of a voice for my peers.
Well, should we move on to that now then? I think you've got some images prepared. Do you want to fire that up and talk us through?
Yeah. Before I do that, I think I'll preface what I'm going to be showing here. So there was an opportunity in 2019. I was approached by S. Devlin, a friend of mine, good friend of mine that I met in Design in Daba, and she had become the creative director of the London Biennale, and she wanted me to participate. We had, you know, we ran into a problem that I think will be more of a common thing, which was with these events like the Biennale, you know, you represent a different country and design a pavilion, and it's usually sponsored by an organization from that country, usually the same organizations each year. So when I went to London to meet with S, you know, the conversation about whether I represent the US or, you know, if it would be about my heritage and represent Nigeria, or even see if there's a way to represent Switzerland as an expat, those were all kind of on the table, but none of them sat well with me. Since I left in 2012, we'll say the politics and the infrastructure of the US was something that was a burden that I didn't feel like carrying with me every day as much. So it wouldn't have made sense for me to represent the US. And, you know, I don't consider myself Swiss, even though this is my home and I love it. And I wouldn't be able to represent the Swiss culture, I felt like, accurately. And I definitely was not going to take the opportunity away from somebody who maybe was less visible or more visible, but at least was residing in Nigeria to represent. So I started to think about this as a concept, you know, like what it means to be somebody like me. And I'm not the only one that has this displaced feeling. I think it's something that's common amongst my people, especially those of us that are, you know, going through this stage of having the mobility to choose where we live, and realizing that, you know, I have a homeland in Nigeria, but because of you know, circumstances and decisions, you know, I grew up with a homeland, but America was not really my home, so to speak. And it's a unique thing. And I think being a first generation Nigerian in America, that means that, you know, the disconnect from my homeland and being born and raised in a place where people of my skin color are not necessarily treated in the best way, it created an identity that is very much one that is not restricted by borders, not restricted by locality. After grappling with it for a long time, I realized that it granted me a bit of freedom where I could choose where to make my home based on really objective, logical criteria, without having emotional attachments to, you know, nationalistic ideas based on where I was born and raised. So all that to say, when I started to reflect on these things in the context of this pavilion, I realized that I have a kinship with all of us that are children of the diaspora, essentially. And, you know, whether it's from the slave trade or through emigration or whatever it may be, throughout the world, we're not just recognized to each other by the color of our skin, but by a sort of inherent kinship that comes from that. So that inspired me to present us with the idea of doing the first pavilion for the diaspora. That was, you know, it's a big idea that presented a lot of problems, namely in funding, because there aren't institutions for the diaspora. We don't have a flag to represent us. We, you know, we are literally displaced people in a sense. So eventually, you know, the idea fell through the cracks. We weren't able to accomplish it because of inability to get funding in time to have it for the 2020 Biennale. But because it was postponed to 2021, I wrote to S and decided that I was going to give it another shot. So now I'll go into presenting you with the idea for the Pavilion of the Diaspora. So I'll start with something that I wrote. Sometimes my projects start this way, and the best way is for me to express myself with words or with music or something of that sort. So I'll just read what I wrote when I started the ideation for this project. I wasn't born into a country. I wasn't born under a flag. The lines drawn were not of my making. I was born into a state of mind that unites all of us scattered to every shore. I was born into a beautiful struggle, a struggle for a place, a struggle for an identity, a struggle to fit into a system of definitions designed to relegate me to the status of a battery at times. A battery for commerce, a battery for culture, a battery for pleasure, a battery that has been sucked dry, and a battery in need of charge. You know, after writing that, I knew that my goal with the Pavilion of the Diaspora would be for it to play that role of a place where you could recharge for all of us, for whatever period of time it stands or wherever it travels to. It could be a place where, you know, we can gather in kinship, we can welcome others to participate in what we do, but more than anything, kind of feel a bit of respite from you know, everything that happens on a daily basis. So I'll get into showing some of the ideation, and you know, this also presented an opportunity for me to more officially establish a collective that we call LMNO Creative. It's led by me. It's essentially right now works as my studio for projects like these, and you know, it's a place for the misfits, and we come up with ideas. So I'll share the first stages of ideation and try to explain as succinctly as possible what the inspirations are behind this project. So let's share screen. You getting my screen here?
Got it, yep.
All right, let me start by making a statement about LMNO. LMNO is, you know, like I said, a collective of creatives. Oops, how did that happen? And right now there are three of us. It's myself, Maxwell Engelman, and Jory Brown. All three of us actually went to Art Center, and I'm really proud to be working with these gentlemen, and they're very talented, and you're guaranteed to be seeing a lot of great work for them when they either move on or continue with LMNO. So now we'll go through some of these sketches. So the idea was to really make a symbolic embodiment of what I felt like could be a rallying symbol for us. We don't have a flag, we don't have symbols, we don't have anything quite organized to represent the diaspora. So I wanted to start by taking a mythological lens, I guess you could say, and thinking of a mythological artifact, and that could come to represent us and could be the inspiration for the pavilion. And I came to the idea of the conch shell when thinking about the fact that no matter what shores we ended up on, when the rallying call is made, we assemble. And you know, the concept of a shell washing up on shore and someone picking that up and sending off a rallying blast, and that resonating to all of the tribesmen of the diaspora to assemble in this place, you know, was really where this concept started. So we went through the process of taking a look at the geometries and the construction, the insides of these shells, and trying to draw inspiration, but also find structural elements that could be employed. So again, we're just going to be going through a lot of rough ideas here. Nothing is concrete and nothing is finalized, but just walking you through exactly where we are. So, you know, these ideas of nesting and modularity obviously became important in thinking of this structure. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure to do was continue what I had started with the Dallas Museum of interactivity, bringing in sound and light to the space, and having it be somewhat of a landed abstract shell that would emit the sounds that would bring everybody together in this communal or community space. So again, a lot of ideation surrounding the surface geometry and trying to find something that also would end up being symbolic and hopefully iconic at the end of the day, with the way that we approached it. And right now we're at a stage where the ideation is continuing. We haven't quite nailed down exactly where we're going to go with this, but we know that we're starting to find the language that we want to go with. And I feel like I feel like we owe it to the people to open it up to them to participate. So, you know, we spent a lot of time preparing for this call so that we could be set up to start taking donations and also start including the public at large in our journey to accomplish this feat. So as it stands, we're really hoping that what we've put together and what we're continuing to put together will help us raise the funds to build this pavilion, to be displayed in June of 2021 in London, and for the diaspora to be for the first time represented on an international stage as an entity that has, you know, an identity that is forming and developing, and you know, has a voice that we feel should be heard. And I guess I'll stop sharing screen now. That's about the extent of the work that I think I want to show today. And I can answer any questions about the project.
So just to recap for people who aren't sure about the London Design Biennale, that's a biannual Design Biennale that takes place in Somerset House in central London. As you said, Ez Devlin is the creative director, but it got postponed. It was supposed to take place in September this year. Can't take place because of coronavirus and has been pushed till next year. And you've effectively launched for the first time, announced this beautiful idea for a pavilion of the African diaspora. And well, let's help you make it happen. I mean, what are the next stages in terms of fundraising, development? What do you need, and what are the processes, and how can we help?
I mean, to be completely honest, I've never done this before, so I don't exactly know.
Well, we only talked about it for the first time yesterday, so you're a long way since then.
So, I mean, we've been working on it, and we've got the concept pretty well developed. We're putting it into, a deck that we can use for fundraising. But like I said, we would really hope that people go to Diaspora Pavilion 2021.com to sign up for the newsletter. Soon it'll be up and running for donations, if not already right now. My guys are working on it. And make a donation, or at least sign up for the newsletter to stay informed about the developments. We're going to still be actively seeking support from donors outside of this. I also have the hope that if enough people are interested and show interest, and check out our Instagram and all of our socials, that we can involve people in the process. This, again, is not about me. I've studied a lot of things that make me a good tool to be used to execute this. And the stage that my career is at has given us this opportunity through S. So I really want it to be something that has input from the rest of the diaspora, that could potentially be funded by us. And also, a lot of key decisions about what happens with it afterward. What happens to the modules afterward, what institutions we would hope for it to travel to, things like that. I would really like to open up, and I'm willing to take the lead on, the design and everything else, and hopefully provide a platform for people to express themselves. Because if executed the way that we hope, this would become, for the time of the London Biennale, a place where we could have community events, performances, displays of works of other artists and designers, even just relaxing and listening to music around the space. So as such, I really want it to be something that has input from the rest of the community.
Well, we feel exceptionally lucky that you shared this with us, first of all. I'll write this up tomorrow, and we can publish a story with a link to how people can find out more information. I was going to ask you what would go inside it, but you've just said it can showcase work, music, just a space for contemplation and meditation as well, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I can go a bit more into it. There's the work that started with the Oracle at the Dallas Museum of Art, and that was the first time that we took the music, and we took design, we took art, and we took experience, and we created a fully immersive experience. My brother Archie is an engineer and a musician, and he built a modular synthesizer from scratch that's able to not only generate music but also manipulate samples. We then built a series of 11 sculptures that could control this synthesizer, which was hidden, and that would affect the sound in the entire space. So whatever group of people were in there moving these sculptures, they actually were able to experience directly what the sound that would be affected by their movements. So it started something, and I think that we're going to continue that. There's going to be some interactive aspects where you can affect and alter the sounds. I'm hoping that we can also make it accessible from away from the pavilion. So either through an algorithm with a hashtag or something like that. We're going to find ways. And again, we're open to help from far and wide, anybody that's from our community that wants to be a part of this and help create something special. We're definitely open to that.
And it's interesting that you said that you met Es Devlin at Design and Africa, which is that great design conference that takes place in Cape Town every year. I was supposed to be there that year. I couldn't come because it was a crucial stage in the putting the glass in our home extension project. And Ravi Naidu, the founder of Design and Africa, was said to me many times since then, you missed probably the best edition of Design Indaba that there ever was. But it's great that I can help close the circle of that conversation that you had there. And presumably you've spoken to Ez recently, and she's aware that you're soft launching this today.
Actually, no. I'm not even sure what the rules on that are.
It's too late now. We've done it.
Yeah, we already showed it.
Okay, I mean, it sounds like a brilliant idea, and we'll do everything we can to help you out and be a platform where we can share information on this, and hopefully the people that make it happen from the financial side and all the other sides can fall into place as soon as possible. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, and you know, we appreciate that immensely. And yeah, again, those were very rough sketches from the beginning of the ideation of the physical form. So you can rest assured that it's going to evolve and change in some beautiful ways.
Tell me a little bit more about the creative company you talked about. Was it LMNO? Is that the name of the collective?
Yeah. LMNO Creative. Yeah. Yeah, LMNO stands for Leave My Name Off. And you know, it actually started as my thesis when I was graduating from Art Center. You know, back that was 2012, and the idea of a multidisciplinary designer or design studio wasn't as common or as considered back then. So I, you know, it really was a way for me to house my creative expressions that I felt like might be hindered by my attempt to be a furniture designer. Because up until that point, the things that I had tried to do that didn't fit into the normal canon of what furniture design, you know, commercially was meant to look like and do, I still wanted a place to do that. And LMNO was my place to do that. And by leaving my name off, I felt like, you know, I could continue in parallel to do my furniture. And as things have turned out, you know, it's kind of evolved into kind of exactly that. You know, I mean, LMNO houses all the work that I would do, but the things that we do as a collective will truly be collective. It'll truly be, we'll have creative input from anybody who is part of LMNO at the time. Right now, there's 3 of us, could grow. And beyond just being a studio, I look at it as, I don't know if I would call it an incubator, but I do, the 2 gentlemen that are working with me right now, I see them as mentees. You know, they're guys that I recognized had a lot to say. And I also recognize that, you know, without someone to put them in a position where they could do that without you know, without filtering or muting themselves at all. You know, without providing that, you know, there was the chance that they could end up in a typical sort of design studio working under people that maybe don't understand their voice, and again would feel the sting of marginalization. So, you know, as a collective, it's important to me that we represent those voices that don't always have a place. And not only that, it is truly my belief that part of the reason that their voices don't always fit in the traditional structure is simply because it's a structure that's dependent on regurgitating some of the cues that have been passed down for generations that indicate when something has value. So really, it's a place where the people that don't think along those lines have the ability to be free. And funnily enough, when you allow that freedom, as far as success goes, you have the potential to reach, you know, heights of success that you wouldn't otherwise by trying to force yourself into the system. So it's my goal that anyone that comes into LMNO would leave prepared to take on the world as an empowered individual with a voice that doesn't necessarily need the approval of anyone or anything else.
And is that a studio that has a physical location? Is it based in Switzerland, or are you sort of in the cloud collaborating in VR? How does that work as an organization, as an entity?
We live in 2025. That's how we operate. Everybody works wherever they're comfortable. My place here in Switzerland is always, you know, a refuge for anyone in LMNO, obviously. And I work from home. I have my studio at home. We meet on Zoom calls. You know, we've been working remotely like this for a while. Jory and I have been working remotely like this since I left the US. So yeah, we're all completely remote right now. I'm thinking about possibly setting up something here in Switzerland in the event that we start working with interns, because I think at that stage it's important to have a home base and some regularity to help them grow. But more than anything, I don't like to think of it as a studio. I like to think of it as, you know, a preparation zone or something at school, after school. I don't really know what to call it, but it's not the type of place where I would hope to take advantage of the people that are coming to work for me or with me.
Well, you joked that you were based in 2025, but it sounds like you're not far wrong. You've been 5 years ahead of everyone else, because we're only just getting used to the remote thing. We've all had a crash course in it. And you've talked about the African diaspora. You yourself are a child of the diaspora, like people who left Africa voluntarily, or more often than not were dragged out of Africa in chains. But maybe this is a good point to bring Chrissa in, because her platform, Africa by Design, focuses on creatives in the continents of Africa and gives them a platform. Are you there, Chrissa?
I am. Can you see me?
We certainly can. Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'd just like to start by saying thank you, and thank you to Inni for inviting me to join you all. So, yeah.
And thank you for waiting so patiently in the wings. Do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit? Who are you? Where are you? And what do you do?
Okay, so my name is Chrissa Amuah. I'm a textile designer. I'm based in London, and as the accent suggests, and you know, from a lot of what Inni was saying, I identify with that, living with a sense of duality, I call it. But born and raised in London, but my family are from Ghana, with bits of Togo and Benin as well. But it's Ghana that I draw my design inspiration from.
And Inni's told his side of the story of how you met, and also the fact of the sense of the pleasant surprise of seeing another Black creative in an environment like the design world. I mean, it was Milan, but it could have been any design week. What about you? What's your experience of growing up and coming into this industry as a Black person?
To be honest, I'm relatively new in the industry, in the sense of my design journey started 7 years ago. I've lived many different lives, and 7 years ago, I had this inclination, desperate urge to fulfill these ideas that I had. So I actually did my master's at Chelsea College of Art and Design, and then it was from there that I launched first internationally at Salone Satellite, and that was the year before I actually met Inni. And my design, as I said, is inspired by, it's inspired by these traditional symbols from Ghana called adinkra. And, you know, there are hundreds of them. They've existed for hundreds of years. And their whole purpose is to encourage our personal well-being and social harmony. So my design premise is to combine beautiful design with meaningful design, with particular focus on our personal living spaces. And I'm going to get into this, but I think the one thing that I think what leads me naturally to the design of my heritage is that, you know, there's soul in it, there's life in it. It goes beyond surface level. And for a lot of people that look like myself, that means a lot and it carries a lot of weight. So that's sort of my design premise. And it was as I was exploring that and doing research that I was coming across so many other incredible African, in particular, designers that just didn't have the platform to showcase their work in a way that I've benefited from, just by, you know, being a person that is able to keep feet in more than one, in one place. So that's where the idea of Africa by Design was born. This idea of creating a platform that celebrates the best of African design talent and showcases it to the world in a way that it hasn't been, you know, hasn't been given the respect that it's due. And I think that what Africa by Design is only 3 years old. We launched in Accra in 2017. And the whole idea is to create a platform for these designers, but also create commercial opportunities for them as well.
I think you've got a little presentation. Did you manage to trim it down a little bit? From...
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we have. And I'm gonna do this and get it right. So I'm sharing my screen. Here we go. Can everyone see it? I'm gonna maximize the, there we go. Oops, bear with me 1 sec. There, can everyone see?
Yeah.
Okay, so as I mentioned, yeah, we launched. So when, you know, I had the idea for Africa by Design, I'd say at least 18 months before I did anything about it. And I would start, you know, I was testing the ground by speaking to different people about it. And, you know, everyone was so enthusiastic about it. But I noticed that whenever I spoke to anybody about it, especially with regards to potential sponsors, they also do it in London. And that for me was completely contrary to the whole point. The whole point was to take the world to Africa and see it in its realest form and in its most diverse form. When we launched in 2017, we had 23 we featured the works of 23 designers from 6 sub-Saharan countries. And I stipulate sub-Saharan Africa because I think in recent history, North African design has been given its own identity and platform, as has South African design, Southern African design. I feel like they're a few years ahead of us with regards to just exposure and opportunity. So the intent was to be very focused and look specifically at designers from that sub-Saharan belt. So we now have, 3 years later, 37 different designers from 7 or 8 different sub-Saharan countries. So that's Burkina Faso, Ghana, Ethiopia, Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, where else have I not said? Senegal, Mali, have I said Mali? And we have a few other people in the mix, and Nigeria as well, sorry, and Nigeria as well. So we're growing steadily, but the idea is to build a family that can all enjoy the platform and benefit from this platform of design. So this is just a foreword, and hopefully people have had a chance to scan it. But we went to a Frexim Bank, who are Africa's export and import bank, and for Dr. Arama, he recognized the fact that this was a very important initiative that was promoting the industrialization and export of design, and not just design, but the image of Africa, of the continent, and of its designers as well. So starting with, so this is just a snapshot and a selection. Like I said, we've got 37 different designers, but we've narrowed it down to a selection of a few. Jomo Furniture. Jomo is from Ethiopia, and his work, I mean, this is the beautiful Ashanti stall, and his work is inspired by not just Ethiopia, but by the continent at large. And he looks at traditional African carvings. He is also looking at traditional iconography as well. And I think when you see the images that there are in this side of the different designers' work, you'll get that sense of you'll get a sense of the duality that a lot of these designers live with, like myself, in the sense that they are leaning on their heritage, their cultural context, but also bearing in mind that a lot of them are operating in a very global society. So what does that mean when you start to translate that into design? So Studio Lani. Studio Lani is run by a female designer, and her name is Lani Adoye, and she is based in Lagos. And, you know, as a designer, she always describes herself as being a versatile designer who is looking at design as a tool to solve problems, but again, putting it into a very modern context. So she does a lot of furniture wares and a lot of lighting. And with a lot of her work, she produces all of her pieces locally in Lagos, and she's working with local craftsmen whose skills would have perhaps traditionally been applied to other more traditional types of design. And she's working with them to, I guess, diversify that skill set and make it relevant also to a contemporary context as well. So this is the City Echo lamp, which is stunning and incredibly beautiful. So Jade Folawiyo is also a Nigerian female designer, but she is, actually I've said her first name incorrectly, it's Jade Folawiyo. Jade is based in London, but leans on very heavily, again, for her, to her cultural influences. And this is, in this picture, this is a fruit bowl and it's part of a collection. And this idea of exploring materiality, as well as on the top is a traditional calabash, which would be used to serve drinks or used as an instrument in certain circumstances. So there's, you know, a real material curiosity on her part. So that's Jade Folawiyo. So Charles Ojob. Charles is a Nigerian designer based in Germany. And in the Manolo store, I mean, he's also a design lecturer as well at a local university in Germany. But this is the Manolo stall. And, you know, he worked for this project, he worked to a very specific brief to invent a new typology of furniture that solved a specific need. So this stall actually serves the purpose of you're able to sit on it, and where the front of it has fallen to the floor, you rest your foot there and use it as a prop to tie your shoes. So it's a very functional piece, but also, you know, the craftsmanship and skill in there is incredibly beautiful, but very minimalist as well. And I think that was one of the things when we launched Africa by Design, a lot of people said, there were two things. When we launched in Accra in Ghana, a lot of people said, oh my gosh, I didn't realize we had all of this incredible talent in our backyard. And that's the shame. And that's what's, I guess, through this whole, you know, what's happening in the past week and so on, that people are really beginning to question what they thought they knew versus what actually really is. And the sad truth, and, you know, I'm not going to go into a history lesson now, but, you know, there's all this incredible, beautiful talent, but we just haven't been given the opportunity to share it with the world and for the world to truly appreciate and respect its beauty. And it's now that people are beginning to look back and say, actually, you know, we're missing something here. So this is looking at a design brand called Design Studio, and it's run by a Nigerian designer based again in Lagos, who is a minimalist designer, and the brand focuses on items for everyday living, and again using local materials, materials that would have been used to create traditional items like mixing bowls and so on, but presenting them in a way that resonates with the modern liver. Does that make sense even? Michael Tete is from Ghana, and he is he was born into a family of traditional bead makers. So beads are a big part of cultural identity in Ghana, along West Africa, and I'm sure many other parts of Africa as well. And he, along his journey, learned how to blow glass as well. So he's based in a village outside Accra. And if you happen to go onto the Africa by Design YouTube channel, there's a short video there that shows the process, his process of blowing glass and making these beautiful pieces. And, you know, someone like Michael, I find very inspiring for his innovation. He researched and learned how to blow glass, but then didn't have the tools, so he built them himself. The ferns that he uses, he built all of them himself. And I think there's not all designers, but the commonality of designers that still very much work with their hands is the intimacy that they have and just the deep knowledge that they have of the materials that they use in a way that I think is very different to what we see in Western design. I'm not saying Western designers don't know their materials, but it's just a very, like I said, it's driven by soul and it's driven by symbolism, and there's this intimacy of connection and so on that I just find very inspiring. Oops, we've got a duplication of a slide. So moving on to Miminat. Miminat Shadeni is an architect designer, and she is of Nigerian heritage, but based in London. And she also refers to her cultural experiences, her the context within which she lives, to explore and manipulate space through form and placement. And, you know, a lot of her work, when you see a lot of her furniture pieces, they are very fluid. And she likes to work in a way that defies categorization. So one minute it might be chaise longues that she's designing, and the next minute it's lights, or it's lamps, and so many other different things. So she's a very diverse designer, and her work is just stunning. It just speaks luxury to me, and just the richness of materiality that she uses with her designs. I think that's all of them. Oh, no, we've gone through. Okay, so sorry. So let's look at Ifeanyi. Ifeanyi Oganwu is another Nigerian designer. We have a lot of Nigerian designers, but with Nigeria being the most populous country in the continent, it is no surprise. Ifeanyi is based here in London, but he was born and spent his formative years in the Delta state in Nigeria. He's an architect and product designer, and his work explores the correlation of history and base materials, you know, and sophisticated fabrication techniques. So this is actually a bookshelf, but it speaks to you as a work of art, as well as, you know, having a functional purpose. And I think that's the beauty of, and the beauty of the diversity of Africa by Designs designers, is that, you know, looking at them, you wouldn't necessarily know that that was made by an African designer. But then there is a story behind it, there are context. I remember Ifeanyi speaking about when he was growing up in Delta, that it being a very industrialized area, so he grew up seeing a lot of metal, and it's only looking back that he sees how and why maybe metal, the use of metal as a choice of material, informs so much of his work. So let's see. So I mentioned at the beginning that I am a textile designer, and this is one of my own pieces. I've taken the ideas and the symbology behind Adinkra, and this is inspired by an original symbol called Ketepa, and Ketepa literally means good bed. And there are proverbs to each of these Adinkra symbols, and the proverb for Ketepa is, he or she that has a good bed has a good marriage. So, I mean, that's one of the cheekier ones, but some of them represent things like unity, represent leadership and authority and that sort of thing. So it is intended to, like I said, build our personal well-being and also social harmony. And that piece is, I screen print all of my stuff, I hand screen print. So that's hand screen printed onto suede. And then we are finishing with another one of Ifeanyi's pieces, a sculptural piece called Rotunda, in which he uses steel as well. So there's a lot more information on our website. We also have a YouTube page. We launched in 2017, and in that time, short time, we've had 5 exhibitions in 4 different cities. So we're really proud, but like Ini said in his presentation, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The continent has such wealth of design talent, and the idea and our goal is to create a platform that showcases everybody and gives them the recognition and opportunities that they truly deserve.
Chrissa, do you want to unshare your screen now?
Yes, I will do that. There we go.
Great, thanks for that. Well, how about we offer you and your collective platform on Dezeen? We'd love to publish all of this work. We'd love to give your designers a platform. Let's talk about that after
Definitely.
this. What's next for Africa by Design then? Do you have any more exhibitions lined up? Do you have any plans to take it forward?
We did our second Accra exhibition in August, and that went really well. The idea now is to take stock and just to see how we can scale it up and to build it, like I said, so that it can include the works of more artists and from different countries. There are countries that we're not showcasing yet. I just last week discovered an industrial designer from Somalia, and I think Somalia is a country that I think gets overlooked all too often. So looking for more talent and just looking at opportunities and ways to scale up the whole platform.
Well, we're here to help you out in any way we can.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you though, it's very easy for someone in the West to think about Africa as one place. I mean, Africa is a huge continent. There are many, many different cultures there. Is there a kind of Africanness in design? You call your platform Africa by Design, but how does that work as an umbrella over such diversity?
Well, that's the thing, and hopefully even just with that small slideshow, you got an insight into the fact that you can't label it all as one. And people are referring to their own, even just with a country like Ghana alone, over 120 dialects and languages are spoken. So you can't put people into one group like that. Yes, there are overlapping threads and commonalities, but people are speaking to their own cultural reference points. I've referenced the Adinkra symbols. Another designer like Neuchâtel from Burkina Faso, whose work wasn't in that slide, but he looks at raw materials around him. So a lot of his works are made from offcuts of rosewood, but he combines natural materials with metals as well. You could maybe say that in certain regions you will find things like indigo dyers. So, for example, in Kano in North Nigeria is said to be Africa's oldest indigo dye plant, and it's been within the same family for over 14 generations. So it just gives you a sense of the skills that are being passed down from generation to generation. But yeah, I don't think it would be fair to sort of clump everyone as, oh, that's African design. But there will be design that you see and go, there's something about it. Maybe it's the choice of materials that have been used and so on. But yeah, it's very broad and diverse.
I think just to jump in here really quickly, I think I agree with everything that Chrissa said. And I think it is a common mistake to try to lump like such a diverse, large, populous continent into like one entity. But one thing that and this is not academic in nature, but this is just my opinion. But one thing that I've noticed as somewhat of a commonality of the work that I've seen is that with everything Chrissa showed, there's always some element where she's explaining sort of the intangible significance of the object that she's presenting. And I think that's something that we see a lot with designers coming from the continent, and also in creative expressions from people from the continent and from the diaspora, is that a table is never just a table. And if there was anything that I would say I see in common with my brothers and sisters, is that is not something that goes overlooked when you're designing something, the way that it affects you spiritually.
And can I add to that? And because of that, I just think there is such a strong culture of it's a whole different design identity, right? In the sense of how things are made. It's not based on trends. It's not based on what is popular, but it's fed by something much deeper. And because of that, it transcends, I think, different social, cultural contexts, because as human beings, we can all relate to different aspects of spirituality in that sense. So I just wanted to add that.
Chrissa, why do you think that we do that? Do you think it's from our parents?
I definitely think so. I think the way that I was raised, although I was raised in London, I was very clear of my Ghanaian identity. It was ingrained into us, even from the food that we ate, or some of the, there are things that my parents did when they were younger growing up, maybe certain ceremonies that they partook in, or, you know, for celebrations, for example, coming of age and that sort of thing, that they didn't necessarily bring with them here, but there were certain things that they did bring here, but it was through everything, it was deeper than surface level. It was much deeper than surface level. And that's what I think what makes, without going into it, everything that's happened in the past 10 days so much more, it hits harder, because as human beings or as a culture, we have never operated on just surface level.
Yeah, and it's like the injustices are that much heavier to bear when you're thinking as honestly a spiritual injustice more than just a physical. It's like not just being ill-treated. It's like, yeah, like, don't you see what we have within us that's so powerful? It's so not respected or revered that it's literally become the lowest rung on the totem pole, on the ladder, and like easily just stepped on and discarded.
And the thing is, we've been operating at, and I think you suggested it earlier on when you started speaking, we've been operating at a muted level for a very long time, be it personally, be it through work. And I think now people will find the voice. You know, as you said, you said, and even with my own journey, you come more and more into yourself. I think now you're just going to see an explosion of self-expression and creative expression, and unapologetically so. Yeah.
I think that's going to be huge, because that's, at the end of the day, what we have to offer, you know, to the spaces that we enter. You know, and even though now is not necessarily a time where I want to be talking about what more we can give, I think it's really important to note, like I said last week, that the travesty isn't in the fact that, you know, our voices are not reaching as far as they could. The travesty is in the fact that there are so many people that could be benefiting from what we have to offer that are not. And it's different from industry to industry, but in our industry in particular, the challenges are somewhat bigger. I think that our relegation to, because what we create has such an ingrained kind of spiritual significance, it is viewed a lot closer to art than it is to design, even though we are designers. I think that that's something that that's a barrier that I've played with, we all play with in our work, and as my work became more visible, you know, in mainstream design, you know, that's been the calling card that for me is just inherent in what I do. You know, I can't design something without having, you know, that depth and the layers and all those things and inscribed into it, you know, and the fact that it is seen as special or unique is it's not that it's laughable. I appreciate it, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, wait till they see everything else that's coming. You know, it's just the way that we came up, I think. Yeah. Sorry, Marcus. We just hijacked your show.
We just had
It was a moment there.
I don't feel that I should interrupt at all. It's amazing to hear you talking so openly. Carry on.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's important for us to have these conversations. I mean, this has been going for an hour, so I'm sure that our audience might be bored by now. But yeah, I think these are some of the conversations that I think need to be had in order for us to be fully understood with the things that we are bringing to the table. I think that you know, getting beyond the idea of having a fetish piece that somehow references pre-colonial African craft, you know, which is the most that we sometimes see when we're looking at interior design, and realizing that there's such a plethora of options that are all completely unique and different to what we've been seeing literally for hundreds of years in the design space.
And can I say, and also for people watching who may now be opening their eyes to African design, I would say I really want you to open your eyes and look at it with the same level of respect and regard that you would give to a Western designer. And I say this referring to an example, and I hope you wouldn't mind me saying, but Sheikh Diallo, who is a really respected, postmodern African designer whose pieces sell for, minimum $3,000 and upwards. And I remember showcasing one of his beautiful chairs in Dubai, and this person loved it. But then when told the price, it was like, oh, but it was made in Mali. Why is it so expensive? Couldn't disassociate with himself with the narrative that he's been told of African craft, with the talent and the beauty, the sculptural art that he was seeing in front of him. So we're asking everybody to just undo what you thought you knew and look and open your heart and mind with fresh eyes.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point too, because what we don't have yet is, we don't have enough elders to be our gatekeepers, so to speak, to be the shepherds of the good in our language. That makes sense, because I mean, both of us have benefited from knowing Jerry Helling, right? And that's a great example of somebody who could see, that could see what we had to offer. I mean, like the table that they picked up, I don't think, like in retrospect, it's like that was a big departure, to go with something like that. And I know that you've worked with them also, and as a gatekeeper, that's amazing. But we don't have that yet, where we have our own gatekeepers to say, I've been at this a long time, and I've got like these platforms, and my eye is critical, and I'm not letting anything through but the best, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And we have elders out there, like people like Stephen Burke, people like Kevin Bethune, that was working with Nike, and even like Charles Job. I mean, these are people that we look up to and that have time in the game and pedigree, but just because of the nature of the design industry, haven't been put in the position where they are the gatekeeper. Marva is a great example of a gatekeeper that we have.
Yeah, Marva Griffin.
Marva Griffin has done a lot for both of us, actually. And
Marva Griffin, for anyone who doesn't know her, is part of the Salone del Mobile, and particularly she started Salone Satellite, which is the young and upcoming designers part of that. And you mentioned Jerry Heller before from Bernhard.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jerry Helling is from Bernhard Design, and Marva is from Salone Satellite. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure Chrissa remembers the first time she met Marva. I mean, Marva came up to me in New York, and I had a chair that was inspired by birthing chairs and the stargazing chairs from West Africa, right?
Yeah.
I modernized it, and I just graduated from Art Center, so it was like modernized, super sleek and polished, and with like splines and surfaces, all that stuff. And you see this regal looking Black woman walking through like the crowd, and the crowd literally parts as she walks through Wanted Design. And she walked up to my booth and started talking to me, and gave me her contact, and then looked out for me from that moment on. And that was my first time actually on the like presenting my work. And from that moment, she was always encouraging me to participate in Satellite, and yeah, she's been great for me. And I'm sure Chris has a similar experience.
Definitely. And yeah, and it's about pushing through the best of the best. Like, we're not, no one wants to fill a quota or a tick box. It's about the fact that the raw talent is there. But, you mentioned Jerry. Jerry has allowed me to unapologetically be myself, like in my design, but also making it and making sure that we're communicating it in a way that everybody gets it. And I will appreciate him forever for that.
Yeah, I think that that's also important to note, that there are, you know, funny enough, as we keep having these conversations about the design industry, there are examples, and I know that because I've been thinking about this stuff for years, like certain examples stand out to me, you know, that if looked at as examples would help us tremendously, especially for those within the design industry that want to be allies to us. Like a good example would be if you look at, for example, Mafrique from Moroso, right? You have an Italian furniture brand, Moroso, and then you have an attached brand, Mafrique, which is run by Salam, and you know, it's a Senegalese man doing Senegalese craftsmanship to produce pieces that their aesthetic, no matter if they're designed by Europeans or no matter who it's designed by, because it's being made in Senegal in a way that these craftsmen have always worked, the soul and the aesthetic of African design is within these pieces, right? And I haven't seen Moroso like imposing on Mafrique, you know, overcrowding it, even assigning any kind of identity to it, but merely being an outlet for it, which is amazing. You know, and as we talk about us having more of a place, you look at, as an example for young industrial designers, it's not just industrial designers that we need to look at when we're thinking about how to form our businesses. You look at in the fashion industry, you look at a designer like Kirby Jean Raymond, right? Who has, you know, put in the work and remained unapologetic and expressed like a very clear voice and owned what he does, you know, and using that as an example as a young, you know, African-American or Black designer anywhere in the world, you can see that there's a way for me to make it with my voice without having to compromise or conform. And I think that that's important as well, that we look beyond, you know, the design industry that we're in, you know, right now.
Well, Chrissa, Ini, thank you so much. It's been a fascinating and important conversation. We would really like to work with you to help elevate more Black designers, help us find them, identify them, promote them, give them space. Chrissa, I'll speak to you later. We can definitely give a platform to your crowd. Ini, we're going to do something with your Diaspora Pavilion, that's for sure. And I really appreciate your time today. And who cares about the audience? You're worried about the audience getting bored.
I forgot.
There's a lot to talk about, shall we say. There still is a lot to talk about. There still is a lot to do. And we want to play our part in helping that.
Thank you, Marcus.
Yeah, thanks for the talk today, Marcus.
And Ini, thank you so much for making this happen and for introducing me to Chrissa.
Yeah, of course. I think, yeah, I think all of us at this point are going to be very dedicated to educating as many people as possible about, you know, what they've been missing. So you'll definitely be seeing that from me as much as possible.
Great. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for coming.